The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey, what do you know? It's the Graphic Histories Podcast. I'm your host, André. Big thanks to Ukla Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again. Well, the day is here. The time has come. As I call him, producer Davin, helped me acquire a guest, which I didn't even think to ask as to be in the show. Davin sent me a slide message saying he put something out there that might be an early birthday present for me, early Christmas present, something to that effect. And then told me after it was confirmed that it is indeed Gary K. Wolfe. Gary K. Wolfe, of course, being the writer of Who Censored Robert. Good start. Who Censored Roger Rabbit, the book that eventually became the film, Who Framed Rob... Man, wow, I can't do this. Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So a movie that I've talked about constantly, and it's been one of my all-time favorites. You know, whenever I ask them what their favorite movie is, I usually try to go watch it. I haven't seen it, and inevitably they ask me what mine is, and I sort of already prepared that it is, in fact, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, because it has everything. It is kind of a musical. It's a romance. It's scary. It's a detective piece. It's a mystery. It's a period piece. It's got humans. It's got cartoons. It's got combinations of famous cartoons from all different types of companies all over the years. And it's just a great movie. Like, for what it is, and Bob Hoskins is a fantastic actor. Charles Fleischer is so good as Roger. All said and done, it's a really, really, really good movie. Of course, Gary K. Wolfe being the one who sort of got the ball rolling with his book, which I have been reading. At the time of I'm recording this, I'm a little over maybe 3/4 of the way through the book. I was hoping to have it finished before I talk to him, and we do discuss it in the conversation. But it's very, very good. It's very different from the movie, obviously. The artifice of the tunes themselves are sort of more like cartoons in comic strips than animated tunes as we come to know them in the finished movie. But it's a great, very well written throwback to classic noir films, and it's really, really good little noir book. Like, you know, if you even just avoid it from the Roger Rabbit mythos, make it its own thing, it's super good. I'm looking forward to finishing that and then reading the other books, of course, as well, that he has done, and that'll be a new project down the line. But all said and done, it was a real joy talking to him. Gary's super cool. I feel like we connected pretty quickly, and you know, he's a man that's very, you know, created something that became huge. And we don't really talk about it. I know there was a lawsuit with Disney at one point. It seems to be settled now over some residual rights and stuff. But all said and done, it seems like he has a good relationship with them now. And yeah, he's very proud of his books, his writing, his creation. And he mentioned some other books that he's worked on, which I'm excited to read as well. You know, he's an author that you may not have heard of too much. I mean, obviously you've heard of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but for his books, they're fantastic. Well worth checking out, and I highly suggest you do so, because you're denying yourself a pretty great noir, and he has a fantasy novel out as well, which I'm going to read, called Space Vulture, which I'm excited for too. So, you know, there's some great writing out there. All you have to do is go and look for it, and you can find it pretty quickly with Gary. But definitely check out his books. They are fantastic. At the time of recording this, I'm getting ready to go on vacation, which is very great. I'm excited to get out of the country. It's my first time leaving the country since COVID. So, you know, we went to Vancouver a little while ago, which was very nice. But now we're going to head to Cuba. So I'm very excited about that. It'll be nice to get away and sit on the beach for a week, go see Hemingway's Hotel, smoke some cigars, drink some booze, and read on the beach. That's one of my favorite things to do on those sort of vacations, and I'm overdue for one of those. So very excited to be able to do it. And yeah, very excited to bring you some great conversations which are coming down the line. We have lots of guests booked. So, yeah, this weekly format is going to keep this train a-rolling. Rolling away. One thing that I found recently, actually, as well, in a used bookstore, was a book by John Byrne. I didn't know he wrote any novels. I thought he was just comics. But he's written a book called Whipping Boy. and a few others as well. And it looks very interesting. I like to kind of peruse old bookstores and see if I can find some of those, cheesy horror paperbacks from back in the day to grab and read. And there's one there by John Byrne, and I was like, is this the same John Byrne? Flip to the author page. Sure enough, it is. So I'm very excited to get into that, too. I think that's going to be reading on the beach in Cuba. So very pumped to get into that. I'll give you a review when I get to that after I finish reading some of Gary's books, of course, which are next on the docket. But, I'm talking about Gary, talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, talking about all that. Why don't we just talk to him? Why don't we get into this conversation with Gary K. Wolfe? Great talk, great conversation. Gary's very free this time. A lot of cool information, clears up a lot of myths, and enforces a few as facts from the Roger Rabbit canon and some of those online myths and stuff throughout the years. So very interesting, very cool, and a great conversation. So hope you enjoy. Tune in to my talk right now with Gary K. Wolfe. Excellent. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I brought my friend with me. I hope you don't mind.
That's awesome, man. I am. I don't want to taint this interview by telling you how much of a super fan I am of this movie, but the movie and the property. But it literally whenever I'm a big movie guy, so whenever I talk to someone about what their favorite movie is, and they always ask me, I always say, "Is Who Framed Roger Rabbit?" So.
Well, me too. So we got a lot in common.
Well, to me, it had everything. It was, literally a romance. It was a period piece. It was a mystery. It was kind of there's horror elements to it. It's musical aspects too. Like it has literally everything in one movie.
Yeah, and it's not been surpassed. I mean, many have tried, but nobody has come close. So.
Yeah, I feel like they tried once. One really tried once, and that was Cool World, and that seemed to tank pretty hard.
Horrible failure. Horrible failure. And we won't even talk about the Michael Jordan.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, Space Jam. I forgot about those. But those are kind of like, I don't know. I guess this one had such a way of incorporating, everything in a way that didn't, that felt like a lived-in universe. Like this is the way it is. Plus, Bob Hoskins and all that great stuff, and Kathleen Turner, and but we can get to that. We can start at the beginning. So,
okay. Hey, I got to tell you, I'm on the top floor. My condo is a penthouse condo on the top floor of a high rise in Boston, and there's a terrific wind blowing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear it.
I cannot.
Okay, so we're okay.
That's
you hear howling, it's not me.
I live in actually, I'm not too far from you. I live in Nova Scotia, so just
never
above.
Been to Nova Scotia.
Oh, well, if you ever come by, let me know. We're just above you there. We're all above Maine, but we get some pretty rough winds on the East Coast up here too. So they certainly come in hard sometimes. All right, so where did you grow up?
In a little town called Earlville, Illinois. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or been there. You get extra points if you've been there. little farm town, about 70 miles southwest of Chicago. Mm-hmm. My father ran the pool hall there, and my mother worked in the school cafeteria.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
See, I feel like that was a day when like a pool hall was like the place to be. Probably
it was the place to be, and it was not seedy like they're portrayed now. I mean, every time the hero goes into a pool hall, the fight breaks out. In all the many years my dad ran his pool hall, I never saw a fight break out. They did have a little section on one side that was devoted to card tables, and the local townsfolk used to give the men, the women. I never saw a woman in there in all the years, but the men used to come in and play pinochle, and they played for money, and they played for serious money. I once saw a farm bet and lost on a pinochle.
My God.
Yeah. And there was a time, although I was very young and barely remember it, when if you went downstairs, there were slot machines. I don't remember those. I think my dad had to get rid of those but they did another thing called punch cards, and a punch card was a card that anywhere from 6 inches square to 12 inches square, and it had little holes in it, and it was divided up into squares, and each square would have like 10 holes. So maybe on a punch card you'd have 100 little holes, and they were all covered with paper on the front and the back, and inside was a rolled up piece of paper. And then my dad had a key. It was like a long piece of metal with a handle on it, and you would put the key in one of these holes, and it just fit, and you'd punch it, and then the paper would come out the other end, and you would unfurl the paper, and it would tell you if you won a prize. And you used to have to pay anywhere from 10 cents to 25 cents to 50 cents for a punch. And my dad would buy these from salesmen who came around, and then people would basically pay it to gamble. And if you got the winning number, it would be $100, and you'd get $100. Well, they found out later that what was happening was the guy who was selling the punch cards would sell the punch cards, and then 3 weeks later, his Confederate would come by and take the punch and punch out all the winning numbers. So,
wow, that's a good grift.
great grift. And the guys used to come through heading down from Chicago and making the circuit of pool halls and play the supposedly good pool players in town for money. And I saw serious money being won and lost on those games too. I was a kind of a pool prodigy. My dad taught me how to play pool when I was really little, probably 4 or 5. I had to stand on a box to play pool. And when one of these hustlers came through, the guys who frequented the pool hall would always say to the hustler, "Hey, play the kid for $50." And of course, I had no idea. And they say, and we were playing 8-ball, and the guy would spot me 7 balls. All I had to do was make the 8-ball. And I always did it. And then my mom found out about it. Oh, that was the end of that. So that was kind of my childhood. It was idyllic. You never locked your doors in that town, and everybody knew everybody else, and so kind of the perfect way to grow up. It was a lot of fun growing up there.
Yeah, and I mean, this is you're born in 41, right? If your wiki is correct. So I mean, that would be like the sort of golden era of that sort of small town USA mentality.
Yeah, and interesting. I mean, in my entire high school, there were the entire school, right? There were 100 kids, and there were 25 kids in my class. Boys outnumbered the girls in that high school by 35 to 1. So, like, good luck getting a date if you're the president of the checkers club, right? But in my class, my best friend was a guy named John Myers. And of course, I went on to do what I did. And now they have a billboard at both entrances to that town saying, Earlville, Illinois, boyhood home of Gary K. Wolfe, creator of Roger Rabbit. So I did that. My best friend John became a priest, and eventually moved up the ladder, became a bishop, and eventually became the Archbishop of New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
So, 2 guys from a class of 25, one of them became the creator of Roger Rabbit, and one of them became a religious icon who is going to have hospitals and schools and streets in Newark, New Jersey named after him. I mean, that's
talk about divergent life paths.
Yeah.
Do you still talk to Mr. Myers?
Yeah, actually, we wrote a book together. We were in the 7th grade, maybe. Yeah, 7th grade, probably. And he gave me a copy of a book that he had just gotten from the library, and it was called Spacehawk. We were both big readers. I read mostly adventure stories, and John read, even at that young age, he was reading histories. And biographies, but we both like science. And he gave me this book called Space Hawk. And he said, hey, this is an interesting book. He said, it's science, but it's fiction. He said, it's science fiction. And we had never heard of that before. Never. So we both read it, and we were just fascinated by this. I mean, best book I'd ever read. And so we went to the librarian at the town library and said, hey, can you get us more of this science fiction? And she said, yes, I can do that. So she got us Asimov and Silverberg, and the towering giants of science fiction. But we were both really influenced by that book. And I mean, there's a clear path from Space Hawk to Roger Rabbit. There's no question about it that got me started down the path that eventually wound up to Roger Rabbit, because I read that book, got into science fiction, started writing science fiction, and eventually wrote Roger Rabbit. So Space Hawk is so it was years later, and John and I remained friends. I mean, we were best friends forever. We were babies together. We grew up together. We've always been best friends. And so one Christmas, I decided I was going to buy 2 copies of Space Hawk and send one to John, and I would read the other, and we would relive our youth, right? Mm-hmm. So I did that. I had to go to a used bookstore, and actually had a rare and antique bookstore, and pay through the nose for 2 copies of this book. I sent one to John, and I said I kept the other one, and it was Christmas present. So I read the book. It's the worst goddamn book you've ever read in your life. I mean, it was horrible. Oh my God. The writing was trite. The lead character, Hawk Kars, was this cardboard yahoo. His right-hand man was a black that was just one step above Step and Fetch It. The villain was something that Hawk Kars called a slanty-eyed nip. I mean, it was racist.
Oh, wow.
There was
Wow.
absolutely nothing good about this book. And I called John and I said, did you read this book? And he said, yeah. And I said, what'd you think? He says, well, it wasn't very good. Yeah. So one of us said, we still argue over which one, but one of us suggested that we should rewrite it the way we remembered it instead of the way it actually was. And so we did that. I got the rights to the original Space Hawk, which was, relatively minor part of the deal. And we were going to rewrite it, but there was nothing about it. I mean, it was like trying to rebuild a car, except all the pieces are rusty. And so you wind up just keeping the hood ornament and driving a new car in underneath it. And so we created an entirely new story, new characters, new everything. But the story that we came up with was more like the story that we remembered, that, the feelings and the emotions in the story. And I asked my agent, I said, hey, can you get me a deal to publish a science fiction book written by the creator of Roger Rabbit and the Archbishop of New Jersey, based on the first science fiction book they ever read as kids. And he said, oh, you don't even have to write the book. He said, I'll get you a deal just based on the premise. But we did write the book, and it was published by Tor.
Oh, wow.
And,
quite a lineage of science fiction.
It was published by Tor, and Science Fiction Essentials picked it as a book that science fiction collectors have to have in their science fiction libraries. The New York Times did a review once of pulp science fiction novels, and they picked, and we call it Space Vulture, which was one better than Space Hawk. So
did you still need the rights to since you changed everything pretty much, or is it just name stayed the same, or since?
We kept a couple of character names. Hawk Kars is still in it, and we kept a few of the descriptions. But let me tell you, the New York Times called it one of the 10 best pulp science fiction novels of all time.
Oh wow.
But we kept some of the characters' names, Hawk Kars, and we kept especially a few of the passages that we remembered and still could quote by heart 30 years after we read it. Like Hawk Kars fired his laser gun and the air was ripe with the smell of singed flesh. I mean, how could you not?
Poetic, yes.
How could you not include that?
Of course.
So we wrote the book, and it did really, really well, very popular. And we started getting letters from people, from mostly men our age, who said, "Well, I never thought I would see a book like this ever again. This was really fun." And then we started getting letters from their kids, because their kids would see this book, or the father would say, "Hey, read this book. I really like it." Or the kids would see it, and a really kind of graphic cover, and it was kind of cool. And the kids would read it, and we started getting letters from kids saying, "Wow, this is really neat." Stan Lee gave us a blurb. Our blurbs were interesting. We got a blurb from Stan Lee. We got a blurb from Gene Wolfe, science fiction writer, and we got a blurb from I can't remember his name, but he's the Vatican's astronomer.
That is fantastic.
Yeah,
that's a nice collection.
It's a nice collection. The Pope did read the book. The Pope was a big fan of mine. He was a big fan of Roger Rabbit. He used to watch.
Really?
Yeah. And the Pope did read the book, and John asked the Pope if he would give us a blurb, and the Pope said no, but go see what's his name, and he'll give you a blurb. So
oh man, the Pope would have been a perfect. That would have been such a perfect addition.
That would have been the get of the year.
It'd be great if you could get, like, I don't know, Stephen King or someone like that, and then just have like Stephen King, the Pope, just every possible person that does like a lot of book blurbs that has a lot of sway. That would be amazing. Well, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, I guess, getting to that, so how did you get into writing? Like, after I see you were into advertising.
I get into writing very early in my life. Once again, you go back to that small town in Illinois, and I was in the second. Oh, you got a cat.
Oh yeah, I got 3 of them running around here. This is Lebowski.
He was a great cat.
Yeah, he's very good.
So I was in a small town in Illinois, Earlville, Illinois, and it was a second or third grade, and our teacher gave us an assignment. It was a picture we had to color. The whole point of the exercise was stay inside the lines. That was the whole point of the exercise, stay inside the lines. So I took the picture home that night, got out my crayons, and nobody was better at staying inside the lines than I was. I was the master of staying inside the lines. And so I started coloring that picture, and the picture was a typical farm scene that you would see around Earlville. It was a meadow, a wooden fence, a farmhouse, a barn, and there was this single cow out in the middle of the meadow. So, I got my crayons. I colored the fence brown. I colored the grass green, colored the farmhouse yellow, because that's the color farmhouses were around my town. Colored the barn red, and I got to the cow. And I'm looking at that cow, and my mother had always told me that when people were by themselves, that they got sad and they got lonely and they got blue. So I said, well, it works for people, it must work for cows. So I colored the cow blue. And turned it in the next day. The day after that, the teacher passed them all out except for mine. And she said, Gary, she said, come up here to the front of the class. So I went up to the front of the class. She said, I'll face the class. And I thought, oh man, I stayed inside the lines better than anybody. So she put that piece of paper right up over my head. And she said, class, look at this stupid picture. She said, everybody knows that cows are brown, cows are black, cows are white. Sometimes cows are brown, black, and white, all three. She says, never, ever, ever, our cow's blue. She said, Gary, don't ever do anything that stupid again. So she called my mom, and my mom had to go to school to talk to the teacher.
Jesus Christ.
It was a big deal for my mom. And so that night, and the teacher said, I think there's something wrong with Gary. I think he needs some psychological help.
Jeez. Oh, she painted it because he colored a cow blue.
Might need to see a psychiatrist. And so that night, my mom and my dad called me into the living room, and they sat me down. They said, Gary, he says, tell us why you colored this cow blue. Why'd you do that? And I said, Ma, I says, it wasn't me, it was you. You were the one who told me people sad and lonely, they get blue. Cows sad and lonely, I colored a cow blue. So the mom says, well, you go outside and play for a while. Your dad and I have to talk about this. So, I mean, like I said, I didn't think this was going to have a happy ending, because my mom and dad were children of the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
My dad had to quit school in the 3rd grade to go to work. My mom had to quit school in the 8th grade to go to work. So these were not what you would call highly educated urban liberals.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these were hardscrabble working folk, and I didn't really know how this was going to turn out. But after a relatively short time, about 15, 20 minutes, my mom called me back in, and she sat me down. She says, Gary, your dad and I talked about this, and we decided the next time you want to color a cow blue, you go ahead and color a cow blue. And so that was kind of,
Wow.
A validation of my creativity. She called my teacher, said, hey, his dad and I talked about it, and let him do what he wants. He's not hurting anybody, and he's not crazy. Let him do what he wants. So 2 or 3 weeks later, we got another assignment, and it was to write a 1-page paper, what you did on your summer vacation. This was my first experience with writing, right? I'd never written a paper before. So everybody else was, writing about how they went up to Starved Rock State Park, or they went to the Wisconsin Dells, or, they went to Chicago to the Museum of Science and Industry or whatever. And I wrote how on my summer vacation, I went out into my backyard and I used tin foil, tin cans, and string and some rubber bands, and I built myself a rocket ship and flew to the moon. The next day, the teacher just dropped it on my desk and said, well, that must have been quite the trip. So,
it's amazing what would have passed for abnormality at that time, right?
yeah,
it's just creativity in a child is enough for them to be like, well, we got to send this kid off to the loony bin.
And I'm hoping that times have changed. Now you got to remember, I mean, this was a small farm town. These were not trained teachers. These were farm wives who were picking up some extra money,
right,
teaching class. So that who knows? I honestly don't remember if it was 2nd or 3rd grade, and I honestly don't remember the name of that teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure she'd be horrified to hear me talking about it now. And I did have some very fine teachers after that who really encouraged me. But it's pretty much where it all started. I mean, I've colored a lot of cows blue since then.
Well, that's encouraging. It's nice to see your parents, because I often talk to a lot of creative types in the show, like comic people and artists and stuff, and often it's more often than not. Although I have been pleasantly surprised in the last little while that a lot of people have been, talking about supportive parents that supported them into going into the arts or going into comics.
And it goes beyond that. My mother. I give a lot of credit to my mom, because she had a woman with a lot of common sense. My dad was creative. He was a musician, played the accordion.
Oh, wow.
Played the guitar. Yeah, played in bar bands, but a bar band back then was a polka band in Illinois. So
wow.
He played in a lot of polka bands, and taught me how to play the accordion when I was just a little kid. But my mom was really the one who had a lot of common sense. And my mom said to me, if you want to get out of this town and you don't want to wind up growing up here and running your dad's pool hall when you get big, she says, the one thing you can do to make that happen is to read. Just read, and that will get you out of this town. And I said, okay. So I started reading, and I was a kid. So what did I read? Well, I read comic books. I devoured comic books. I would go to Andy Giles' B Street Smoke Shop on Tuesday when the new comics came in, and I would read all I could read before he kicked me out. And then I'd, buy whatever I could afford with my allowance, and I'd trade them with my friends, and read comic books. And also the corollary, I saw a lot of cartoons at the local movie theater. So comic books and cartoons. But my other reading material of choice was something that my dad read. And my mom and dad were not big readers. They didn't read novels and stuff like that. But they read a lot of magazines. My mom read a lot of romance magazines. But my dad read something that was called True Crime magazines.
Mhm.
And I don't think they exist anymore. I certainly hope not, because they were graphic portrayals of true crimes.
Okay.
And by graphic portrayals of true crimes, always murders.
Oh yeah.
So you would open it up, and there would be a 5-page story on a graphic murder that happened someplace. And if you ever saw a movie called Road to Perdition with Tom Hanks,
I'm a huge fan of that movie.
the Jude Law character, the photographer,
Yeah.
he was based on a guy named Weegan. And Weegan used to do this for these magazines. He would be on the police band radio, and when he heard of a murder, he would go to the crime scene. You sometimes get there before the police, and often rearrange the bodies so they were more photogenic.
Jesus.
And
I didn't know that. I read the book that it's the comic that it's based on not too long ago, and
so
I love it as well. But that character is not a character in the book.
yeah,
So I was surprised.
That's an actual true character.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I read those, and my mom, again, good mother that she was, never once said about my comic books or my true crime graphic not mystery and graphic magazines. She just never once said, don't read those, it'll rot your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I graduated to a better class of detective fiction. I started getting into Dashiell Hammett and Ross McDonald and John C. McDonald and a lot of the good noir mystery writers.
Mm-hmm.
So those were my two passions. I had a passion for comic books. I had a passion for noir mysteries, and so when I started writing science fiction, I wrote a ton of short stories, and realized that I could make much more money by writing one novel instead of 12 short stories. So I wrote a novel called Killer Bowl, which was a dystopian novel based on football. It's played in the year, I wrote it in 76, and the football was played in the year 2010, 2011. And a lot of things I predicted actually came true. I predicted this cell phones, the internet, gas crisis, a whole bunch of stuff.
It's funny how that works, and it seems like a lot of I don't know if it's just that there's an empathy that comes with with creativity in certain writers that allow them to perceive the world and advance it in that way. Because a lot of folks that seem to have Star Trek, there's a bunch of stuff in that too. But the idea that a lot of these fictions that have depicted the future have done a pretty decent job of figuring out exactly where a lot of the things
what's going to happen. Yeah. What's going to happen. And so I wrote that one, and I had an agent who said I can't sell short stories, but if you write a novel, I can sell that. So we sent it to Doubleday. Doubleday bought it instantly.
Wow.
And and they gave me a contract for 3 more books. So I had a 4-book deal with Doubleday, and they said, publish, you write whatever you want. We really love your writing. You write whatever you want. So my second novel was A Generation Removed, which was also science fiction. My third was The Resurrectionist, also science fiction. For the fourth, I wanted to combine the loves of my youth. I wanted to combine cartoons, comic books, comic strips, and noir fiction. So, not easy topics to combine. So I was watching Saturday morning cartoons one Saturday morning, just for research. I told my wife,
Of course, in quotes, in air quotes, research.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he bring me another cup of coffee and a muffin because I'm watching Saturday morning cartoons for research.
Yeah.
So, but the cartoons were, pretty simplistic. Now that I know about cartooning, uh, they were not done on the ones, they were done on the 12, so they're all jerky.
Mm.
But I was really taken with the commercials because I saw cartoon characters. I saw Captain Crunch, Trix Rabbit, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Tony the Tiger, cartoon characters talking to real kids, and nobody seemed to think that was odd. And I thought, wow, what a great idea.
Wow, that's it. That's
What
amazing.
would happen if you had a world where cartoon characters were real? What kind of a world would that be? So I spent a year developing that premise and looking at all the various things that happen in cartoons that would be a lot of fun, and comic strips and comic books that would be a lot of fun if you put them in a novel with real people. And I came up with a story that would only work in the context of a world where cartoon characters were real. I came up with a hard-boiled private eye. I named him Eddie after my dad, as an homage to all those horrible magazines he let me read. And I wrote the book, and so I sent it to St. Martin. I sent it to Doubleday, and this was the fourth book of my 4-book deal. Now I'd written a ton of short stories. I'd written 3 novels before this. Never had a reject until this one. This was Who Censored Roger Rabbit, and Doubleday sent me back, called me up. My editor called me up and said, Gary, he says, we're going to reject your novel. We're rejecting your novel. And I said, he says, why, Sharon, why are you rejecting this? This is the best thing I've ever written. She said, well, I agree. She says, it's funny. It's unique. I've never read anything like this. She said, but that's the problem. It's so different from anything I've ever read before. Anything that you've ever written before. She says, it's so different from anything anybody's ever written before that I had to take it to the marketing department. And the marketing department rejected it. So I called the head of marketing. I said, Chuck, why did you reject my book? And he said, we passed it around. We all loved it. He said, but it's not a regular fiction novel. It's not a regular mystery novel. It's not science fiction. It's not a children's book. He says, there's no category for this on the bookstore shelves. I can't sell this book. I can't sell it. I said, okay, what would you do if somebody gave you The Wizard of Oz, or Gulliver's Travels, or Alice in Wonderland? What would you do with those? And he thought for a minute. He says, I couldn't sell those either. So I went to my agent and I said, Bill, what am I going to do here? If I can't sell this book, I don't want to be a writer anymore because this is what I want to write. He says, we'll find a wonderful book. We'll find it. So we started sending it out to other publishers, sometimes other editors at the same publisher. And along the way, Who Censored Roger Rabbit got 110 rejects. It's rejected 110 times, multiple times by a publisher once, several times by publishers twice, and a couple of times by publishers 3 times.
Wow.
And in those days, rejects used to come by mail. I don't get a lot of rejects, so I don't know how they come now. I guess an email, but in those days, they came by mail. And my wife used to call my trip out to the mailbox every night the daily disappointments, because I would go out and come back with a fistful of rejects. Sometimes 4 or 5 rejects. And
that is staggering.
Finally, and it was always for the same reason.
Yeah.
Editors loved it. Take it to the marketing department. We can't sell this book. So finally, it landed on the desk of a woman named Rebecca Martin, who was an editor at St. Martin's Press. And Rebecca had just edited a major bestseller for them. And so the president of the company gave her a vanity project. He said, for your next project, whatever book you want to publish, you can publish. and Roger Rabbit came across her desk. And like all the editors who had read it, she loved it. So she went to the president of the company and said, here's this book, Who Censored Roger Rabbit? And this is the book I want to publish. It's my vanity project. So he said, okay, I'm going to read it. I'll read it tonight and let you know in the morning. So he took it home that night, came back the next morning, called her into the office. He said, Rebecca, I told you you could publish anything, but you can't publish this because I can't sell it. And so Rebecca stepped up to the plate and she said, hey, you told me I could publish anything I wanted. Publish this or I quit.
Wow.
So he published it. And albeit in very small quantities. I think that original run, the hardcover Roger Rabbit, was less than 5,000 copies, which is nothing, drop in the bucket.
This is staggering to me,
Yeah.
just because like I'm actually reading it now, the original book, because I was like in wanting to talk to you. I was like, well, I've always wanted to. I just never got around to it. I was like, well, now's the time. So I got it, and I've got it, and I was hoping to finish the first book and then read the next because I know the style sort of changed between books. But I'm only about halfway through the original, and it is. I love detective novels as well. Like I've been reading a lot of Walter Mosley lately. I've always been a Dashiell Hammett fan. Spillane, others as well. And as far as like, it's unique, it's fun, it's a great detective story. Like the concept of like the living toons and how they take photographs to make cartoons. The like even the speech balloons appear by their heads and how that's even part of the solving of the crime. The clues are left by those. The idea of there's sort of avatars that they can kind of create mentally. Like it's all very interesting stuff that is I can see at that time period why it might be a hard book to sell, but it's a great novel. Like it's really, really good. And like I don't want to just blow smoke up your ass because you're on the show, but
oh no, go ahead. My ass needs it.
but legitimately, I love the book. It's fantastic, which also was relieving to me because I love the movie so much. I was like, oh man, if I hate this book, what's this going to mean? And then I start reading it and I was like, this is great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm pleased. Of course, I'm pleased with how the movie came out, but I'm equally pleased with the fact that in mystery circles, mystery reviewers consider Eddie Valiant to be on a par with Sam Spade, Philip Marlowe, one of the prototypical hard-boiled private eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that really tickles me is when somebody comes to me and says, you really made it work. You really made a world where cartoon characters are real and really crossed it with a hard-boiled private eye novel and made it work. Mm-hmm. And it was nice for me. People always say if you could do anything differently, if you had a time machine and you can go back and change your life, what would you differently? And the thing I would do if I could go back in a time machine, I would go back to 1981 when that book came out, mm-hmm. and I would buy all 5,000 copies because they came out at the cover price of $2.99. And now, if you can find an original on eBay, they're north of $500.
Oh wow!
So I would have bought all 5,000 and I would have put them in a barn. So.
That's right. That's right. Just like the guy with the punch card, you're just figuring it out, right?
It took me a while.
Gone full circle. So, what was the path from that to the film? Because like the film, it's funny because there's more. Like I'm about halfway through the book now. I don't want to like reveal anything in case folks are going to read it that are listening to the show, but right in the heart of the mystery of it now. And, so many characters that have popped up that I can see influencing either similar or other versions of the character, like the monkey that carries people up the stairs, being the Ink and Paint Club bouncer, baby and
Baby
all those,
Herman.
Baby Herman and all those characters. Like they pop up and have varying degrees of importance in the story of the movie. But
so what happened was there was a year lag between when St. Martin's bought the book and when it actually came out. They bought it in 1980, came out in 81. Mm-hmm. And midway through 1980, I got a call at home. My home number And I answer the phone, and the guy on the other end says, "Is this Gary K. Wolf?" I said, "Yes, it is." He says, "Oh, hi, this is Roy Disney from the Walt Disney Company." I said, "Yeah, right. That's close." Like,
Sure,
right.
buddy.
Disney is calling me at home. I said, "Yeah, who's this really?" He said, "No, really, it's Roy Disney." And I said, "I'm interested in," I said, "I read your book." I said, "Yeah, right. It's not even out yet. It hasn't been published." And it turns out that somebody at St. Martin's thought that this book would appeal to the Walt Disney Company. So they
Jesus,
sent a copy of the edited manuscript to the Walt Disney Company.
you have a
And I
secret angel
never
somewhere.
found out who. I tried because I wanted to reward them and kiss her or him on the lips for doing that. But I never found out who did it. But they sent it to the Walt Disney Company and it made its way up to Roy Disney. And it turns out that, yes, Disney was extremely interested in it. Now, this was 1980. And at that time, Disney was in danger of becoming, they were already a second-rate movie production house. They were in danger of becoming a third-rate movie production house. They were making movies about Flubber and the Nutty Professor and the black hole and the
Yeah.
black cauldron, which disappeared down the black hole.
Yeah. Well,
They
it's funny
were,
because I've talked to someone on the show before, Stephen Gordon, who was an animator that worked on the Black Cauldron, and that was right around the time when Disney was like making some really movies that the
yeah,
public were
yeah,
not like, these are the Disney movies we remember or want. They're
yeah,
cool movies. I love the Black Cauldron, but they
they were
didn't
making
sell.
movies that were the second half of double features,
Yeah.
and there were soon to be no more double features. So
Mhm.
they were making movies that nobody was ever going to see. So they needed something that was going to propel them back into the top ranks of movie production stardom, so to speak. And they'd been offered ET and turned it down. They'd been offered Star Wars and turned it down. And they needed something that was going to punch their ticket. They saw Roger Rabbit as being that project. The other thing was, I don't know if you've noticed, but uh, if you can't walk down a street, and certainly in the United States, probably in Nova Scotia too, without seeing somebody wearing a cap or a sweatshirt or carrying an umbrella with a Disney character on it. They make a lot of their money in merchandise, and their stable of characters was growing kind of thin in 1980. They had Mickey Mouse, but he had become the corporate spokesmouse, and you couldn't really fool around with him or have any fun with him. So, you had Donald Duck, and they could have fun with Donald Duck, but you couldn't understand what he said. So, he was kind of off the table. So they saw Roger, Jessica, Baby Herman. They saw these as new characters they could add to their character stable and sell some merchandise. So they offered me more money for the rights to do this than I had made on everything I'd written put together. So I was not one to say, "No, you can't do this." I said, "Yeah, go do it." Honestly, I mean, you're reading the book now. I did not think the book was filmable. I did not see how they were going to take my story and convert it to film, because I wrote that book to be the best possible book I knew how to write. And it appeals to a reader's imagination. You read it and you get into the scenario, you get into the world, and everything in that world is consistent with a world where cartoon characters are real, and it's all in your head. I didn't see how they were going to do that and do it realistically in a movie. I just didn't know. But if they were willing to try, fine. And
Well, yeah, especially with
yeah,
the artifice, because like of them being like the version of Toons in the novel are like Toons in comic strips, not
yeah,
so much in physical live action Toons, because at that time
yeah.
period,
So for a while they kind of proved me right. I mean, they really didn't have the horsepower in 1980, 1981, 82, or 83, or 84, or half of 85 to do this. They tried live action animation hybrids, and it just didn't look good. It didn't work. Admittedly, they did not have the technology to do it. A lot of the technology we used in the movie we invented for the movie
Mhm.
and did not exist in 1980 to 1984. Mostly just didn't have the horsepower.
Mhm.
As an example, Roy Disney went to Warner Brothers and said, "Hey, we're making this movie, live action animated movie. It's going to have all of our characters in it. Going to be quite spectacular. And we'd like to use Bugs Bunny in a cameo. Can we have Bugs Bunny for one scene? He's going to come out and just say, 'What's up, Doc?' Bite a carrot, then walk off. What about that?" And Warner Brothers looked at Roy Disney and says, "Get lost. There's no way that Bugs Bunny is ever going to be in a Walt Disney movie." So 5 years later, Steve Spielberg walks in, who is now the producer of this movie, and makes the exact same request. "Hey, I'm working over at Disney, and we're making this live action animated movie. How about can we use Bugs Bunny in a cameo?" And to Spielberg, Warner Brothers says, "Of course, of course. You take Bugs. What about Porky? You want Porky too? Sure. Hey, how about the Roadrunner, Wile E. Coyote,
Wasn't there
Yosemite Sam, Sylvester and Tweety Bird? Take them all. Take them all."
was there truth to the story that like that had to be like Bugs couldn't have more lines than Mickey?
Okay, so that Bugs Bunny was a bona fide cartoon superstar, and the rest of the characters, Steve got for a minor fee. I don't know, $1,500 a character, which was jump change.
Peanuts for that, yeah.
And the only character that was contentious was Bugs, who had a contract.
Mhm.
Being a superstar, he had a contract, and the contract stated that Bugs Bunny, being a co-equal superstar with Mickey Mouse, had to be in every scene with Mickey Mouse. All right. You could not have a scene with Mickey without having Bugs. And they had to have the exact same number of words of dialogue. Okay. So you can go through and you can check it out, and you'll see that Bugs and Mickey are in every scene, and that they have the exact same number of words of dialogue. Now, somebody pointed out that early on, when Eddie Valiant is first walking through the Maroon Studios, that Bugs walks by himself.
Mhm.
So Bugs can walk by without Mickey, but Mickey can't walk by without Bugs.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing that I just recently found this out. I didn't know this, but of course the movie's set in 1946, and Bugs has gone through a lot of iterations over the years since he was developed. I think the 30s sometime, but the Bugs that's in that everybody kind of loves and remembers is a 1942 Bugs. Bugs today is more modern and angular, but the animators wanted to use the 1946 Bugs, actually the 1942 Bugs, but this was 1946. They wanted to use the 1946 Bugs in the movie, and Warner Brothers said, "No, you've got to use the 1985 Bugs. We don't want them looking at an old Bugs. It's got to be the new Bugs." And it was very contentious, and the animators were really upset about it. And so finally, one of them came up with a solution, and they did two versions. They did a version of the Bugs and Mickey scenes where Bugs is the 1946 Bugs, and they did a version where Bugs is the 1985 Bugs. And they showed the 1985 scene to Warner Brothers, and they put the 1946 scene in the movie.
Yeah.
And Warner Brothers became aware of that when the movie premiered.
Wow.
And Warner Brothers.
Oh no. That's huge.
They blew a gasket. But then, I mean, the movie grossed more than $1 billion, right? And all of a sudden, Warner says, "Wait a minute," because they were getting requests for the 1946 Bugs as a doll. Said, "Hey, maybe we can do something here." So
yeah,
that proved to be a tempest at a teapot. The other interesting Bugs Mickey story is that the animators basically hated Warner Brothers because Warner Brothers was just constantly harassing them about their characters and what their characters should look like. So the movie was being animated in London. Dick Williams was the lead animator, and he had um, stable of animators that he brought in. A lot of them from former Iron Curtain countries who couldn't get any work anywhere else. He brought them in, and it was like a little United Nations over there. You had actually there were Ukrainians, there were Russians, there were Swedes, there were Latvians. I mean, there were all kinds of different people, and English was not the common language. I mean, they all spoke their own language. So if you wanted to speak to the Ukrainian guy, you had to speak to the Spanish guy, you speak to the Italian guy, you'd speak to the Ukrainian guy, and it would come back around. So there is something called a gag in the margin. And gag in the margin is film goes through a camera at 24 frames a second. So animators have to draw 24 pictures or cells per second to match up to that. It's called on the ones. And that's why Saturday morning cartoons are not as good and kind of choppy.
Less frames,
they Xerox every other one, so they're on the 12s. So the animators discovered early on, back in the days of Gertie the Dinosaur and Oog and Moog, when animation first started, Betty Boop, they discovered that you could mess around with 6 of those 24 frames. So 6 24ths of a second. You could mess around with them and put in little sight gags, and nobody could see it. Like in every Betty Boop cartoon, everyone, Max Fleischer, who did those, whenever Betty Boop says boop boopy doop, the front of her dress falls down, right? And then she picks it up, and there's 6 frames. And the only people who ever saw this were the projectionists in the movie theaters who would see them. And usually they would take a pair of scissors and cut them out so that they would last 6 showings. But that's called a gag in the margin. And the animators decided they were going to put a gag in the margin to get back at Warner Brothers. So they decided that when Mickey and Bugs are floating down on the parachutes and Eddie's between them and they give Eddie the spare tire, they wanted Mickey to give Bugs the finger. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so to translate this to the guy who was doing the scene, who was from, I don't know where, let's say Latvia. I have no idea, but let's say Latvia. They had to go again from the Spanish guy to the Greek guy to the Russian guy to the Latvian guy. And again, all those jokes that you see, the message got turned around. And so if you watch that scene and you watch it frame by frame, which you can do now with good quality CD player, you will see that the message got convoluted. And instead of Mickey giving Bugs the finger, it is Bugs who is giving Mickey the finger.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely the wrong message.
Well, is that like, because I remember there's that big rumor forever that if you pause the right scene that you could see up Jessica's dress as well when she falls in.
Yeah, sure. That became kind of famous.
That's a very famous one.
What happened was the first gag in the margin was Betty Boop. They wanted to do an homage to Betty Boop in front of her dress falling down. So the animators did it, and I was involved with the movie by this time.
How deep were you involved? Was it just as a consultant? Were you just as a consultant, or what?
Yeah. I mean, Steve Spielberg and Bob Zemeckis both valued my opinion, and they loved my book. They'd all read it when it came out.
Awesome.
They thought I had really good ideas, and they let me sit in, and pretty soon people would ask me questions, and I'm not an animator. I can't draw, but I got a pretty good sense of humor and a pretty good story sense. And I was an executive script consultant, and I really got along with the animators. I love the animators.
Awesome.
Every time I went into the animation department, It was like, it was like I was Moses coming down from the mountain bearing two stone tablets, which are writ large, the words Roger Rabbit. And anyway, the animator said to me, "Hey, we're doing this thing. We got a gag in the margin." And they explained to me what that was, and they showed me when Betty Boop says, "I still got it, ain't I, Eddie?" Oh, boop boop be doo. The front of her dress falls down. I said, "Oh well, I don't know." I said, "That's above my pay grade."
Yeah, especially in a Disney film.
They said, "Well," I said, "you got to take that up with Steve." And they said, "Well, can you ask him? He likes you." And I said, "Oh, sure, I'll go ask him." So I went to Steve and I said, "Hey, I explained gags in the margins and I explained about Betty Boop. And I said, they want to do this. Can they do this?" And he saw it, and he's got a pretty good sense of humor. He says, "Yeah, it's really hilarious." He says, "Yeah, they can do it." So I went back and says, "Okay, Betty Boop's in." So he said, "Well, can we do more?"
No, no.
So I went back and I said, "Hey, they want to know, can they do more?" And Steve said, "Yeah, they can do more, but nothing R-rated, nothing X-rated, R-rated. It's got to be PG-13. And that's it." So the movie is pretty much filled with them. And, one of them is when Eddie and Jessica are in Benny the Cab and they're coming out of Toontown and they hit the dip and they hit the light pole
Mhm.
and they go sailing. First of all, if you freeze frame that, you can see that Eddie's a dummy. It's not really Bob
Mhm.
Hoskins, but Jessica does this beautiful full cartwheel in the air. Her dress billows out and it matches her hair, which is also billowing out, and it's a full cartwheel. And her arms are and legs are out, and she's forming an X. And of course, her dress falls away, and you can see she has no underwear. Right. Then boom, but it's like six frames out of 24, 624 of a second. Um, and it's a lot of fun. The only people who knew it was there were people who worked on the movie. Well, when the movie came out on video cassette,
Mhm.
um, I think it was Frank Marshall, who was the producer, went on one of the late night talk shows and told the Betty Boop story,
Mhm.
right? And caused a hornet's nest at Disney. Oh my God, we've got a topless woman in a PG-13 movie, and um, so they called in all the video cassettes and took that scene out. The only place you can see that scene now is if you get a hold of a copy that was shown on airplanes, because it's still in that copy, or if you go to Bob Zemeckis' living room where he has those six frames framed on the living room wall.
I'm glad the
Um,
guy has a sense of humor. I'm a big fan of his films, and
yeah.
this
But,
obviously this one
you
specifically.
know, as a result of that, people said, "Well, wow, if that was in there, wonder what else is in there." So people started looking at it frame by frame, playing like a video game, and they found the Jessica scene. And
Well, you got slow motion now, right? So yeah.
yeah, so to show you how non-salacious it was, USA Today printed in full color one of those six frames on the front page, and it's like looking at your Barbie doll.
Yeah.
There's nothing there. But of course, when that happened, it caused another sensation. Oh my God, now we've got a bottomless woman in this movie. And so Disney had to come up with a rationale for that. And the first rationale was, well, we had the film duped on video in China, and it was a rogue Chinese animator.
Oh wow, throw China under the bus.
So
Those damn Chinese.
so
Let me
that
tell
didn't
you.
so that didn't fly. So then they said, well, no, it was an animator who worked for Disney, and we're going to track him down and we're going to fire him, and he's never going to work in the animation industry again. Well, everybody knew who it was, and everybody knew that he was slated to direct a huge animated movie for Disney, and they weren't about to fire him. So That one just kind of went away. But there are lots and lots of those things in the movie,
Yeah.
and it's well worth your while to watch it frame by frame. It'll take you
Well,
62 days, but well worth the time.
it's nice to get confirmation because that was one of those like film things that has been broiling across the internet for a very long time. But no, it's such a great film, and I'm glad to know that you had some say and some input in as a consultant in it as well.
Yeah, and and everybody says, well, because you're reading the book, the book story is different from the movie story.
Oh, yeah,
The
100%.
story has to be different from the movie story, because
It's great. You can enjoy both now, right?
book's a book and a movie's a movie, and
Yeah.
people who read the book and see the movie tend to like them both, for different reasons. Um, when I did the sequel novel, Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, I was kind of conflicted because I hadn't ever planned on doing a sequel to the book. But
I'm guessing there was no issue with the fact that you'd sold the rights to Disney. Was it just film rights? You're allowed to do what you want with the book?
Just the film rights. I have all the literary rights. I've written 4 Toontown novels and 1 book of Toontown short stories. And I can write newspaper articles, magazine articles,
Cool.
whatever. I can't use the likenesses of the character because Disney and Spielberg own those. So in order to use those, I have to go to Disney and Spielberg. Like I use a likeness of kind of Jessica on Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, although it's not Jessica, it's her twin sister Joellen. They're twins, but they're not identical twins. Joellen is only 6 inches high, and she's in the cover. She's perched on Eddie's shoulder, and she and Eddie have a kind of a romantic relationship, which was a whole lot of fun to write.
But you're Roger in those covers, is
Yeah, Roger's on the cover of that one. Roger's on the cover of Plug too.
Yeah.
So, but for the second one, because the movie, as I say, grossed $1 billion.
Yeah.
And so probably, I don't know what, 500 million people have seen it. And to them, the Roger in the movie is the Roger with Jessica that they're familiar with, and probably half a dozen people have read the book, and most of those were my mother and my aunts and you. So I changed the conceit of the second novel so that the characters in the second novel are cartoon characters, and they have the ability to speak. But it's easier for them to use word balloons, so they can kind of go either way.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I always have to point out when they took my book and made it into a movie, yeah, they changed the story, but they kept what I consider to be the most crucial elements. They kept the concept of cartoons, comic strips, comic book characters, whatever you want to call them, living in a human world, and Toontown. They kept that, and they kept the characters. All those characters are my characters. Roger Rabbit, Jessica Rabbit, Baby Herman, Eddie Valiant. Those are my characters. I mean, Eddie's named after my dad. I mean, they could have changed the names of all those characters. They could have changed Roger into Roger Raccoon, and, but they didn't. So, I'm kind of gratified by that. The movie was, nobody really, when we were making this movie, nobody really knew if it was going to be any good.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know if it was going to be a blockbuster smash sensation or another Howard the Duck.
Oh God, yeah, I guess that's a fear. Huh?
Yeah. So, when the movie came out, they premiered it at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. I was living in Boston, so I didn't have to go to LA. So I went down to New York City and went to the premiere. And I wound up sitting in the balcony with the VIPs, and on my left, I had Kathleen Turner, who was the voice of Jessica Rabbit. On my right, I had Amy Irving, who was Steve's wife at the time, who was the singing voice of Jessica Rabbit because Kathleen was pregnant when she was doing the voicing and couldn't sing, or maybe she just can't sing. I don't know. But Amy stepped in and sang for her. So I was sitting between two of the most beautiful women I've ever met in my life. And I'm getting ready to watch my movie all the way through. I'd seen it, bits and pieces, but they were still working on it up to like a week before it was released. I was going to see my movie all the way through. I was going to see my screen credit for the first time. And, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, life just doesn't get any better than this.
Mhm.
And then by golly, life got better because Kathleen reached over and put her hand on my leg and whispered in my ear, she says, Gary, are you excited? And I said, Kathleen, you have no idea.
More so now. Yeah. Oh
So,
no, that's
so from our hotel room, my wife and I were staying right across the street from Radio City. And from our hotel room, I got up the next morning and I had heard that they were going to be doing round the clock showings of the movie. And I looked out my hotel room window and I could see the theater below me, and it was 6 a.m. and there was a line around the block. And at that point, I knew we caught lightning in a bottle here.
yeah,
And
that's
this is
fantastic.
good.
That's awesome. No, it's well, as a kid, I think it was one of the first VHS I ever bought, and I watched it. I probably wore it out. I watched it so much, and then I bought a DVD, and then I bought a Blu-ray, and then I bought the 4K. So it certainly got a lot of money out of me through the years, and now the books. So and I got like some statues and some pop figures and some other stuff hanging around that have been given me over the years because people know I'm a fan. So I think I got the statue. I think at Disney.
The day the movie came out, they came out at Radio City Music Hall, and I had heard, I saw at the premiere and at the after party, Bobsey's wife was wearing a pin, and it was a paved, jeweled, Swarovski jeweled pin of Jessica Rabbit. And I said, wow, that's awesome. I assumed Bobsey had it made for her. And I said, wow, that's awesome. Bob made that for you. She said, no, it's merchandise. I said, there's merchandise? She says, yeah, there's merchandise. I said, where at? She said, oh, Macy's. So my wife and I, the next day, we had to check the merchandise.
No, yeah, of course.
So we went over to Macy's, and I went in the front door, and there's an information booth. And I said to the young woman, I said, do you have Roger Rabbit merchandise? She said, oh, yes, we do. I said, where at? She said, second floor. I said, oh, we're on the second floor. She says, second floor. So I went up, and the elevator got off, and the whole second floor was Roger Rabbit merchandise.
Wow.
Entire second floor. And I told my wife, I'm going to buy the first piece of Roger Rabbit merchandise I see. And the first piece I saw was a Roger Rabbit lunchbox. Plastic lunchbox, was $2.49. It had a thermos inside, and that's the first piece I saw. Bought the lunchbox, and I'm just sorry that the first piece I saw wasn't that Jessica Rabbit. You got to take what you can get.
That's awesome. And is there like, I remember hearing rumors, and like, you probably be the authority. You obviously are the authority in this. That there was like attempts to do a prequel where it would take place during like the war and other things like that.
Yeah, the prequel movie had fits and starts after, in Hollywood, money is everything, and the
Of
movie
course,
made $1 billion. And a rule of thumb is that a sequel will make about 3/4 of what the original made. So you're looking at 3/4 of $1 million, and
well worth it.
$1 billion. And so they were rolling ahead with the sequel. Rob Minkoff, who went on to direct The Lion King, was going to direct, and then later Eric Goldberg was going to direct. Steve had approved a script called Toon Platoon, which was kind of a World War II thing, which I had some problems with because you get into trouble if you get too close to reality with cartoons on a human world. Like if cartoons really were around in World War II, Superman would have gone over and kicked the crap out of Hitler and
Fair enough.
saved us all a lot of trouble. So you can't skate too close to reality, but they liked the script, they approved it, but then a lot of political stuff happened. Jeffrey Katzenberg left Disney, and he and Steven formed a partnership, and uh, uh, DreamWorks SKG,
Mhm.
Spielberg, Katzenberg, and David Geffen, and it was a very acrimonious partying. Jeffrey vowed that he would never do anything to make Disney another nickel, and so he told Steven, who controlled the production rights to Roger Rabbit, don't make any more Roger Rabbit movies. We're not making them another nickel. And so that project fell apart, and it kind of came and went over the years. There was a time when all of a sudden Bob Zemeckis was given a bungalow at Disney, and so was Steven. And they all came back, and then Kathleen Turner and Frank Marshall, who were the line producers, came back, and somebody asked them, what project do you want to do here? And they said, we want to do a sequel to Roger Rabbit. And this was in late 90s, early 2000s. And it looked like this was going to happen. But again, politics got involved and it fell apart. And then Disney started doing only CGI stuff, Shrek and that kind of stuff. And they don't seem to want to do anything anymore with any of their classic characters, even Mickey Mouse.
Mm.
So, what's going to happen? Well, I think eventually you'll see something.
I think you wait long enough. There's things that are
If you wait
coming
long
out
enough, it'll
now that
open
are
down because,
sequels to things.
and it's going to happen for the same reason that it happened the first time. Disney is going to need a blockbuster movie to reassert their position as a top-ranked movie house. Their superhero stuff isn't doing well. Their Marvel stuff isn't doing well. They're kind of stuck, making reboots of Frozen, Frozen 12, Frozen and
Yeah.
Ice.
Well, now they're just making animated movies and then doing live action versions of them if they're successful, like within
Exactly.
years. Like they're doing a Moana one now, and it's like that movie came out like 3 years ago, not
Exactly
actually
right. Yeah.
5 years ago. But yeah, I was just I was curious about that because I know it's rumbled around a little bit here and there. I was curious because I know you're a veteran as well, like you were in Vietnam. Is that correct?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So I thought maybe the war thing might have been a bit close to home for you
No,
as well.
no, that was not my idea. And and if anybody had ever really seriously asked me, I would have said, "Hey, I don't think this is a good idea." And I was not unhappy when that one bit the dust. But they did come up with one after that.
Mhm.
Who discovered Roger Rabbit? Was going to star Tom Cruise,
No, wow.
the guy named Richie, and it was all about how
Roger became a
Roger
star.
leaves his boyhood home in a farm town in Illinois called Pearlville, and and goes to Hollywood to be a star, and he gets picked up. He's hitchhiking. He gets picked up by this guy Richie, who is Tom Cruise, and goes out to Hollywood, and he gets hired on as a stooge to Baby Herman, and kind of screws up the whole thing. And it was really kind of cute, and
Yeah.
that was
And
the
still sort of connects with the original story because that was
yeah, and then
his
it
role in
connects
the
really
yeah.
it connects really well. The if you want to read a good one, read my latest Toontown novel, which is Jessica Rabbit's Serious Business,
Mhm.
which is a Jessica Rabbit origin story, and talks about how Jessica started out as a kind of unattractive, not particularly um, uh, socially apt shop girl, and how she goes from that to becoming Jessica Rabbit.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. I'm gonna
yeah.
be reading all the rest after I finish this one.
Well,
I really gotta get into
and that one, that was my pandemic book. I wrote it during the pandemic,
it.
and I wanted to make sure that I thought Jessica deserved a book of her own because she's my most popular character. I wanted to write it without denigrating her, without overly sexualizing her.
Was that something that surprised you about how that character has kind of become? I guess she was sort of designed that way. Oh, actually, that was another thing I was really impressed as well by that they included that the line "I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way" that's in the film is actually directly from the book.
Yeah,
Which is,
the lines I'm proudest of, that one,
that one's fantastic.
and the other one that I'm proudest of is Baby Herman's line. I've
Oh
got a
yeah.
50-year-old lust and a 3-year-old dinky.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that one is probably the best line I've ever written.
I always thought the one I quote the most. I mean, that one gets quoted a lot, but I always from the film it specifically is when they have the whole exchange with the handcuffs, and when he says, when he says, "Will you stand still?" and he takes his hand out of the cuff, and he goes, "You mean he could have done that at any time?" And he's like, "Not any time, only if it was fun."
It was funny.
Yeah, that was to me. It's one of my
Yeah.
the killer lines.
Oh, oh,
But yeah, so like I guess the way that like characters kind of become, this ridiculous sexual icon in the way that I never understand why cartoon characters do.
yeah.
But she
You know,
has.
whenever I give a talk to like teenage boys, they bow down in homage to me for having created Jessica Rabbit. Jessica Rabbit was named one of the top um, uh, female sexual icons of the 90s. And I'm thinking, she's a cartoon.
I know, yeah. I don't
You can
understand
make
it
her look
either.
like anything you want. I mean,
Yeah.
if she's up there with Scarlett Johansson, well, it's a lot harder for Scarlett to look good because you can't redraw her face. So
Hmm.
um I if I could be proud of anything, I could be proud of having created characters, Roger, certainly Jessica, that are going to be around long after I'm gone. I mean, these are cultural icons. And 50, 100 years from now, I'm hoping that people will still look back and say, wow, Jessica Rabbit, Roger Rabbit, I know who that is. Just the way people now look back and say Mickey, and maybe they'll pass into the public domain like Mickey Mouse has, and people will be making their own movies. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely think you've created an amazing legacy and some truly iconic characters that I guess that's the hope and the goal of any creative type, right? Like that you'll give something to
Absolutely.
the world that will outlive you and live on,
Yep,
and that way
absolutely.
a way of you does. So that's awesome. Well, I'm assuming there's more books down the pipeline. Do you have anything coming up that you want to
Yep.
discuss?
Right now I'm working on a couple. I'm working on um, a regular hard-boiled mystery novel. I'm still drawn to mystery novels.
Hmm.
And I'm working on a hard-boiled mystery novel with a really unusual twist, which I'm not going to tell you because somebody listening will steal it. Uh,
Well,
but
I look forward to reading it.
but it's a really, really good. And when you read it, if you like hard-boiled mystery novels, you will say, "Yeah, this is a hard-boiled mystery novel."
Do you have
Or
one that you hold? Like one hard-boiled mystery novel you hold is the upper, like the best one for you?
you mean the best hard-boiled mystery novel I've ever read?
Exactly. Yeah.
Geez, I don't know. I've read a lot. Farewell, My Lovely is pretty good.
Oh
Um,
yeah. Right on.
and in terms of hard boiled, My Gun is Quick or I the Jury, um, Mike Hammer,
Hmm.
uh,
Oh yeah.
good stuff.
I've
But
recently
I'm also,
read
yeah, but I'm
Harvest, and
also
that's
working on a new Roger Rabbit Eddie Valiant novel,
oh excellent.
and yeah, and I'm introducing a whole new type of tune in that one. Um, which I can't tell you about either because you know, there are spies out there and someone will steal me. But
I think I might have an idea. I'm curious. I'll send you a private message and ask
all
for
right,
it. Yeah. All
well,
right.
I'll private message you and I'll tell you what it is because
Oh
you're not
great.
going to steal it.
Oh no, God, I'm not going to tell anyone. So I'm just happy to have a little insight. I mean, I'm a big fan, so this is pretty fantastic. Awesome. I look forward to reading those
Okay,
and all the other future stuff. And I can't thank you enough for your time, Gary. Thank you.
that's my pleasure. Hey, I'll leave you with one final story.
Sure.
Okay, final story. Um, when we were making the movie, like I said, Steve Spielberg was the guy who was tasked going around and getting the cartoon characters from other studios.
Hmm.
And he wanted to make sure that everybody who was involved in that movie in any significant way had his or her favorite cartoon character in the movie. So Bob Hoskins was Heckle and Jekyll.
Oh,
Um,
nice. That's
yeah,
awesome.
Bob Zemeckis was Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. Dick Williams, the lead animator, was Droopy. So Steve went out and got all those characters. He made sure. And he came to me and he said, what's your favorite character? He said, Steve, I think I'm taken care of. I've got Roger, I've got Jessica, I've got Baby Herman. I think I'm covered. He said, well, I want to do something for you. So we'll do something for you. So if you go and watch the movie, and like I say, gag in the margin, Italian is going through the tunnel and he's coming out into Toontown. He's coming out into Toontown and the curtains lift and all of a sudden there's birds and song and dancing and whatever. 6 frames. If you look over on your left, you're going to see a brown wooden fence, a yellow farmhouse, a red barn, green meadow, and a blue cow standing all by itself on the middle of a field.
That's so amazing. That's heartwarming. Oh, man. That is amazing. That is so cool. Wow. Yeah. Well, the blue cow endured, right?
And blue cow endures. Lives forever.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
All right. It was my pleasure.
Oh, man. It's been a real joy. And have a good one.
All right. You take care.
Bye-bye.
See you.
There it is, my conversation with Gary K. Wolfe, author of Who Censored Roger Rabbit, author of Space Vulture, author of Who Plugged Roger Rabbit, and that stutter is part of the title, and a few others as well. Great author, great guy, really fun conversation, and man, dude in his 80s, and he's still rocking it, creating amazing novels, and still as active as ever. And I just love, because sometimes you talk to people that have created a thing that the world kind of took from them. I'm not saying like they're bitter about it, because some people are. But once their thing gets taken and becomes like a global phenomena, sometimes they get a bit bitter about that. But not Gary. He's super proud of his books. He's super proud of the films. And he celebrates them. Our whole conversation, he had a giant Who Framed Roger Rabbit stuffed animal with him at his side. And he mentions it when we start talking. And, he obviously loves it. He's very proud of his work, and he's very proud of what came of it and the impact it's had on the industry and on the fans. And, I love talking to folks like that aren't, obviously sometimes things happen in life and it can make you bitter about something created in the past, and you may not want to talk about it as much or be sick of talking about it. But, a guy like Gary sort of embraced it and realizes that what he's done has sort of gone beyond him and is sort of proud of that. And, for creators out there, writers, I feel like you should learn a lesson from Gary sometimes. I'm not saying all of them. I mean, lots of folks are super whatever, but sometimes, you create something and it may not be yours anymore. It may have been turned into something else, but you need to find the joy in that because you were an integral part of that becoming a reality. And thankfully for Gary, he is. And I just super positive guy, a really great, sometimes you talk to people on the show and they kind of charge you up a little, and Gary's one of them. So if you also have some extra time on your hands, you should check out a documentary. It's on YouTube. I don't believe it's an actual film, so I tried to rate it on Letterboxd, and it wasn't there. So I'm not sure if it's just a super long YouTube clip or whatever, but it's called The Complicated History of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which kind of goes into the entire history from the book to the studio and all the issues the studios had until it finally got made. They do show some of the test filming and test shots they did early on with sort of different versions of Roger and Eddie, and it's super cool. If you're a big fan of the movie like I am, it's well worth your time to check out. So do that. And also come back in a week's time for another rip-roaring fun episode of the show. Now, I'm always a little hesitant until I have the recordings in the bag to announce the next guest, but as far as the plan goes right now, you've just listened to my talk with Gary K. Wolfe. And now, if I recall correctly, let me double check my notes here. I'll be talking with Stephen Grant, who is a former Marvel writer. Did a lot of work on The Punisher and a lot of cool stuff for Marvel Comics as well. Really cool guy and also a pretty big get, from old school comic fans. So very excited to get a chance to talk to Stephen and bring him on the show. But that'll be next week's episode. I will catch you then. In the meantime, stay safe, have fun, read comics, and just, go watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It'll bring a smile to your face. Whether you need it or not, it'll bring a smile to your face. The Graphic Histories podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.